Hello, my name is Abhishek Patel, uh, and I'm a food enthusiast. Very, very passionate about food, specifically in the Deccan. I like to thank Face Foundation uh, for putting together this wonderful series of small little lectures on Hyderabad, the city of many stories. Today's topic is, something which Hyderabadis are very, very, passionate about, and has been ingrained in the culture of Hyderabad, biryani. And the story of biryani is quite legendary. Has many, many, so if you go up in the north, you will find a different story of biryani. If you're here in the south, you will find a different story of biryani. But there truly is only one real story of biryani. And I'm just about to tell you that entire lovely journey, how biryani came to India and became so much more of an Indian food than its origins, actually. Biryani comes about, is an amalgamation of two words, uh, biryan and brinj. So, biryan is nothing but fried meat or braised meat, and brinj is nothing but rice in Persian. So, these two words originate from there, but even in Iran today, you don't have a dish called biryani that is cooked. So, this dish is indigenous to Hyderabad only, and there are many such stories which as I talk to you about, you will get to understand that why rightfully biryani also has the GI tag only in Hyderabad. Biryani in its original form, when you have this dish in Iran, it's only called biryan. Now, fried meat in Iran is served along with flat bread. So there is a context to it, in even in Indian cuisine, or even in the biryani that we eat in India. There is a certain type of biryani which is called a chilman biryani, which has a type of flat bread to give dum. Biryani, when it eventually came to India, this is a form of a Lashkari food. Now, while the armies were coming, there is an origination of biryani, and it actually came through to India through the armies invading, the northern armies invading into the country, and it follows a pattern, of different conquests that happened, both at central Delhi, and then when the eventual, invasion of the Deccan by Alauddin Khilji and his armies, and then establishment of the Qutub Shahis out here, the Bahmani dynasties, and all of that. But more importantly, if you look at it, the evolution of this particular dish happened only specifically in the Deccan, not anywhere else in the country. So biryani comes about only as a dish that was made in the Deccan, and there are different strains of biryani, but they're actually pulaus. So the history of biryani goes a little older, even before the conquest of India by the Arabs or the Persians or the Mughals. This goes back into the Arab trade in the Indian Ocean that was happening at that point of time, and the Arab traders were specifically in places like the Malabar coast as well as the Coromandel coast, and in Cochin and in Machilipatnam, and south of Machilipatnam as well. Now these traders, they formed communities, interesting communities through marriages out here, and one of those communities is called the Mapilas in Kerala, and there is a wonderful biryani, very, very flavorful, heavy in cardamom, that is cooked there till date, and that's called the Mapila biryani. So these communities, this goes back even older than Islam, if you look at it in literal sense, because when Islam was expanding across, like there was a strain which went northern, so they went to Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, what are today known as that region. And from there, what comes are the Mongols. And when the Mongol invasion happened in India, and the Mughals came inside, you had a different, what we call as today a northern biryani, but it's literally a pulao. So it follows a very fantastic route, and as you travel along the Silk Road, you will find these wonderful words. They are called as pilu, pillow, and pilaf. And these words in different countries eventually land up in India to form what is known as the pulao, in the northern part of India, including Kashmir as well, where they cook biryani, but it's actually a yakni actually, which is nothing but meat cooked along with its stock, and then finally, rice over it. But the Dakhni biryani, which is called as the Kachi biryani in Hyderabad, is very, very different. The Kachi biryani is where the meat and the rice are cooked almost at a raw stage. So this evolved exclusively in the Deccan. And what happened here was, the Mapilla, so you have, now I'm talking about 3 strains of biryani already. So you have the Mapilla biryani, which came in from the south, which is at the, through the Cochin, Cochin and the Coromandel belt. And then you have the, the Cochin and the Malabar belt. And then you have the, the pilaf of the pulao, which comes in from the northern belt. And then you had the influence of the Qutub Shahis, which were actually Persians, who came in and established their empire here in the Deccan. This biryani originated out here exclusively. The word biryani, which is a combination of these 2 words, brinj and biryan, which is fried meat, owes its, or credits its entire history to Iran and the Qutub Shahis and the Bahmanis actually. So this is largely a Lashkari food, very, very easy and quick, to make. One is that there was ample amount of meat, through sheep and cattle that could be cooked, and rice was aplenty in the south. So it was very, very easy for these guys to assimilate, these dishes and cook it over fire or slow fire, using the dum method of cooking. And that's how actually biryani became a very, very indigenous product, cooked here by the armies or the invading armies, and a very Lashkari food. And that's how the entire, biryani found here in the Deccan. Now, of course, the Qutub Shahis influenced the cuisine of the Deccan in significant ways. They brought about various dishes from Iran, largely because of their patronage towards the Shah of Iran at that point of time. And these dishes were exclusively cooked here in Hyderabad. That could be the kubuli, which is another interesting form of a biryani, or a rice dish actually, which is cooked along with chana dal, or kubuli, cooked along with chana dal and chickpeas, or chana dal or chickpeas, so that you have a different type of this thing. But largely, the biryani is very, very focused here on the Deccan. So there are some lovely, interesting stories. Sarwar ul Mulk, who was the tutor to the Nizam of Hyderabad, mentioned in his autobiography and his biography, My Life, you will find a mention that of this fantastic dish called biryani, which is cooked here in the Deccan. And he mentions it, and if you know about Sarwar ul Mulk, he came from aristocracy in Delhi, and when he came and settled down here during the Asif Jahi period, he found out that this particular dish was cooked here in the Deccan, and none like anything that he had ever eaten before, and there wasn't some of the key ingredients that are used in biryani to make biryani today. You will is just lamb meat, there is yogurt, there is chili powder, and spices primarily, and then there is rice predominantly. So these are the key ingredients that are used to cook a biryani, but this never used to be the same. Biryani was earlier cooked only using black pepper, even during the Qutub Shahi period, and largely these dishes were highly aromatic because of using black pepper. But slowly, as chilies came into India, and this is something that is again uncommon history, but chili started coming into India after the invasion of the Portuguese, or the establishment of Portuguese as a state, when they established Goa, and they started cultivating chilies here in the Deccan, and it started with the Gowai mirchi, and eventually, even in Andhra belt, in the Krishna district, both chili and tobacco, both of these, ingredients were brought in by the Portuguese, from South America actually. And 1529 is when Portuguese established their power in the Deccan or in the south of India, and they started trading and building this as a land spice route as part of in the Deccan belt. And slowly chili started getting introduced in the Hyderabadi cuisine or the Dakkani cuisine, what earlier used to be known as. And it slowly replaced pepper or black pepper and became the more common ingredient to be made in form of biryani. So chilies got introduced much later, post 1500s, into the Hyderabadi or the Dakkani cuisine, and that's how actually chilies formed its entry into the biryani. But if you go back and understand why yogurt was used, now when the Mughals were, they were largely armies invading, and they used to carry a bag of sheep coat, made out of the intestines of, sheep, and this small little bag and wrapped in leather, that used to have goat's milk inside it, and it used to be against a horseback, and with the heat of the horse running, the yogurt would start fermenting into a different type of a new strain of bacteria would get introduced into this entire thing, and they called it mast-o-khair, and eventually these Persians started using this as a tenderizer for the meat, and it that's how it became as a very effective tenderizer. So both of these ingredients, if you look at it, both chilies as well as the yogurt, which is used as tenderizing, and not only tenderizing, adds wonderful taste as well. A little sourish taste to the biryani comes in from these. Then of course, other tenderizers like the raw papaya that is used here to tenderize the meat, and then there is just the lamb meat that is used to cook the biryani. Now, why this dish became indigenous out here is largely because this was very easy and convenient to cook. You didn't require too much of time. It didn't require too much of marination time, and all that you needed was large vessels, right? This used to be carried along with the armies when they would march towards a particular region, and rice was available in plenty through the villages. They could pick up the rice and the meat as well, and they could quickly assemble it together. So that's why this particular dish is actually a Lashkari food, very good. The spices and the meat give a lot of energy to the soldiers, including the carbohydrates that come from the rice. So all of this put together, the proteins, the fats, and the carbohydrates come together in this particular dish and actually make it a very effective and a dish to provide you a lot of energy, especially to the soldiers. And not only that, with smaller quantities, it can be very filling at the same time. Yeah. So these are some of the reasons why this dish became very popular, and eventually actually started becoming more of a celebration dish. But its origins lie in the Lashkari food, which were primarily food of simplicity for the armies of the Deccan. So this is how the biryani originates, or owes its origin here. Now, of course, there are many strains of biryani that are cooked here. You have you have the Mapilla biryani, which is of course in Kerala, and then you have Nellore biryani, which is used on the eastern side of the coast. Very different kind of biryani, very flavorful, very spicy at the same time. And then you have the more balanced, which I would call as the true biryani of the Hyderabad and the Deccan, which is extremely aromatic, very flavorful, and gives you a variety of spices that are cooked, that are local homegrown spices out here, including cardamom, clove, javitri, and all of that. The biryani which is cooked in the north is very different from the one which is cooked in the south. Now, The Lucknowi biryani, which people call it today very popularly, or the Delhi biryani, is a very, very highly aromatic dish. Now this is cooked along with rose water, kevda, a lot of saffron that is there in it, and makes this highly, it's a very, very aromatic dish actually. But the biryani which is cooked here in Hyderabad is less of, I mean there is in fact no rose water and kevda which is used at all in the Hyderabadi biryani, but it is just the flavor of spices and meats and the the pudina and dhania, which actually provides the flavor to the biryani. So it's much more robust, rustic at the same time, simple, and very flavorful. So this biryani is very, very different from the biryani that we have in the north. But one thing which is very different, which is primarily the difference between these two, is the style of preparation. Though both are made on dum, or use in a form of a cooking called dum pukht, which is cooked on steam, but the Hyderabadi biryani is cooked raw. That means the meat and the rice at the starting point are completely raw. Whereas the biryani which is cooked in the north, which is both in Kashmir, Delhi and Lucknow, is a pakki biryani, which one would call, or a yakhni biryani, where the meat and the stock are cooked and prepared separately, and then the rice is cooked separately and added on top of the already cooked meat, and then given dum, just finished off actually. So that biryani is very, very different from the biryani that is cooked here in the Deccan. So that's really, so there are many wonderful, strains of biryani, or what, each region of the country, biryani started becoming so popular over a period of time that there was different strains of biryani which actually evolved, independently in these locations. Some of them, of course, were, built out of, local traditions, custom spices, cooking methods, techniques that were there, which were common not only to those areas, but also, they were cooked largely in terms of, simplification of the food, easy to cook, and ingredients commonly available in those regions. Now we spoke about the Maipilla biryani, and so that is traditionally only a Malabari, on the Malabar coast. But when we talk about the Kashmiri yakhni pulao, that's a very, very different technique which uses heavy saffron. So it's a very extremely aromatic pulao, or a yakhni. So it's a combination of a yakhni and a pulao cooked in stock. So that biryani is very, very different. Then comes the Awadhi, or originated much older, but popularized by Asaf-ud-Daula, and what became as the cuisine called dum pukht, which is another different type of biryani, cooked along with saffron, a lot of kevda and rose water. So it's extremely aromatic but perfumed biryani. And then there is, so when Asaf-ud-Daula was exiled in a place called Mathia Burj, which is in Calcutta, there is a different biryani that originated in Calcutta. They use a completely different technique, again homegrown, technique where they cook it with potatoes as well. So aloo along with meat, not found any other part of India, but specifically in Calcutta, which is called as the Calcutta biryani. Another very, very popular dish. But one of the, I mean, if you've traveled across the country, and you have different types of biryanis in different locations, there are largely about 4 or 5 primary ones, and there are regional influences that biryani has. So then you have the Coromandel biryani, which is another spicy version of biryani, but again very flavorful. But out of all of these, the most unique one is the Hyderabadi biryani, because not only does it, has a very, very unique technique in cooking the biryani, but the flavors are extremely robust, very flavorful, full of, very aromatic at the same time, but doesn't use, itr or, a saffron to influence the flavor. The flavor comes about by the robustness of the spices that are used while making the biryani. So, cloves, cardamom, black pepper, The garam masala itself close to about 11 to 12 ingredients. There are several families that have more and more complex preparations of garam masala. So if you go to Lucknow, there are certain garam masalas that will have as many as about 20-25 ingredients. But the garam masala which is used predominantly in the Deccan, largely 5 or 6 ingredients. Some families which have their roots way back in UP or in Lucknow, these came during the Asif Jahi period. So they got influenced. The Hyderabadi biryani now has a very mixture of both Qutub Shahi as well as Asif Jahi influence because of the cooks that came who would make this particular biryani. So it becomes, over a period of time, slowly evolved into a much more dish of celebrations than just simple food for the armies. And each family or each period introduced new tastes, new flavors into the biryani. But yes, the Hyderabadi biryani is a fantastic culmination of technique, robustness of spices and ingredients to really make a fantastic meal. So you look at the 3 ingredients that come together to make your food fabulous: proteins, which come from the meat, the fat, which is in the form of ghee, and plenty of ghee, the good amount of fat that is used to make this particular biryani, and then you have rice, which is large carbohydrates, and all 3 of these become make your meal really fabulous. There are of course 2-3 things which are typical to the Hyderabadi biryani. The quality of fat that is used. So traditionally, only certain varieties of cows that were bred, only ghee from those cows was used to make the ghee. Nowadays there are a lot of hybrid cows, the ghee is used from them, but traditionally only certain varieties like Ongole, cows that were there, they were used to pull out the ghee, and that ghee would be actually beneficial for consumption, good for health. And that will actually elevate the quality of the biryani, and not only the flavor also would be fabulous. The rice that was used in biryani traditionally, today it's of course basmati, but basmati is a very recent phenomena, primarily because of its ability to be very versatile as a quality of rice in terms of the long grain that is there, and it adds not only flavor, aroma, but also adds body. But traditionally, the rice that was used commonly for cooking the biryani was the kala bhat, or the black variety of rice. It has a little bit of saltish flavor to it. That's how the name originates also from, kala bhat. So it was used, and this is a broken wheat variety and not a long grain at all. It's a very short grain that was used traditionally to make biryani. This was the common variety of rice cultivated here, but now of course for commercial purposes, largely because it fetches a better price, the basmati is used. But traditionally, the basmati was never used to make a biryani. And of course, the masalas that were there were very simple, brown onions, which add a lot of taste to it, give you that slightly sweetish touch to the biryani, and then there is the flavors from the masalas that come inside. Then of course top it off with saffron, right? And again, saffron adds only the flavor to the top rice of it, and pound it well. The more you pound saffron, they say it's like diamonds. The more you polish it, the better the flavor of saffron that comes out from the and gives added aroma to the rice. So this is how the traditional biryani is made in Hyderabad, and continues to, and its rich traditions continue in the families today, and each family has its own fabulous techniques, cooking styles, the masalas that they would add, their own style to the process of cooking. So each recipe is unique in its own way, but very historic, important dish for the in the cuisine of the Deccan. French traveler Tavernier, I mean, he accounts and through his travels we understand biryani a little better. When he came here, he saw that in the Deccan, most of the pulaus that were being cooked at that point of time, or the biryani that would be cooked, were heavily loaded with black pepper. And interestingly, from his voyages, even in Isfahan, there is a very interesting. He noticed how biryani was actually being cooked, or biryani was actually being cooked. So they had a dish. It doesn't give it a name, but where large carcasses of goat were actually hung, roasted, marinated, of course, and roasted on pit fires, and there would be rice below, and it would be through those juices that would fall down, the rice would get cooked. So these dishes were also observed by him when he traveled here in the Deccan. So it is mentioned in his travels, of this particular form. The dish is not mentioned, of course, but we can comfortably assume that it was the biryani that was cooked here as well in the Deccan, and using the same style. But of course, now the styles have very, very evolved. Now they've used the 3 stones, and then cook it on dum by sealing the entire dish and putting hot coal over the or the daig or the lagan in which is cooked. The daig is more used commonly here in the Deccan, whereas the lagan is used more commonly in up north to cook the biryani. So Hyderabadi is again, you will see that there's a difference between the cooking dishes itself to cook biryani, and that largely comes through the cooking process, because since you're cooking it raw, you will like to use a slightly deeper vessel to cook the food. Whereas since the the northern kind of biryani or the Lucknowi yakhni is already a pre-cooked dish, you don't really need to give rice that much dum. So they use a lagan, which is a much shallower dish, to cook the biryani. So now, very interesting thing is that once the dish is already made and served, then there are very interesting accompaniments that go along with the Hyderabadi biryani or the Dakkani biryani. You definitely have the mirchi ka salan, again native to Hyderabad, and then you have dahi ki chutney, and there is kachumbar, which is kind of a salad that is also used. All of these 3 are like fantastic ingredients, specifically used in the Deccan. But during the Asif Jahi time, there was another type of raita which was introduced here, which is called as the Burani raita. Now, Burani raita, the origins of this word comes from the word Purani, which was one of the daughters of Harun al-Rashid, and she had a huge fascination for yogurt, and that's from the word Purani originates the word Burani raita. So Burani raita got introduced, but in Hyderabad traditionally it's always had with dahi ki chutney and of course mirchi ka salan. So these are the typical accompaniments that go along with the biryani. Okay, so this is how the biryani becomes such an integral part of the cuisine of the Deccan, and specifically to Hyderabad. Of course, Hyderabad earlier was a complete state, not just a city, but Hyderabad Deccan was the erstwhile Nizam state, and this became a very, very important dish, and it's cooked till today. I mean, of course, popularized by families. The market, the Paradise and the other restaurants that popularized it across the country was very different. But traditionally, it has a very, very, deep fabric in the lifestyle, culture, traditions of families, basically in Hyderabad, and that's why this particular dish is very, very, native to this part of India, and that's how the entire story of biryani comes about, and that's why it's so special, to Hyderabad. And